If you are just joining us, it is 4 o'clock at the top of the hour right now on 12 News. And if you're joining us on 12 Plus right now, we have reached a verdict in the Lori Vallow Daybell conspiracy to commit murder trial of Charles Vallow, her former husband, her fourth husband. And that verdict is guilty, which means that she would face a life sentence without the possibility of release until serving at least 25 years. And again, she is already serving a life sentence in Idaho for the killing of her two kids. Criminal defense attorney Hector Diaz is joining us now. He's been giving us expert analysis since we came on the air roughly 45 minutes ago. We also have 12 News journalist Erica Stapleton. She's been covering this trial from beginning to end, even in Idaho. And she is inside the courtroom right now. We also have 12 News journalist Rachel Cole. She is outside the courtroom for any reaction. We have been told that there is some family members of Lori Vallow Daybell inside the courtroom. Again, she is in there until, everybody is released, and then she'll give us a live report of just basically reaction in the courtroom, which is, really what I'm curious to see what that is like. But we were showing a little bit of video that was from a feed that is on a 5-minute delay. And really at any moment now, we expect to turn that video and bring you the verdict as it is being read by the bailiff. So we are still waiting for that. But again, the jury found Lori Vallow Daybell guilty of conspiracy to commit murder of her former husband, Charles Vallow. Again, no surprise to you. You called it from the beginning. The only thing that probably was a surprise is how long it took. About 3 hours of deliberating.
Right. Now, in retrospect, again, I think the time was reasonable. I think that, they're considering the exhibits, all the information, all of that, the prosecutor, in this case, Trina Kay, put forth. I think that they just, spent their time and said, this is a serious case. We're talking about a first-degree murder of an individual. Despite that they're not allowed to go on social media and research this case, they sit there and they know. They know that this is a really serious case. Somebody died. Yeah. And so I think that, and they also know that.
But do they know her history of being convicted of killing her two kids?
They were likely given a jury questionnaire before they were chosen, and they were probably asked about their awareness. And, I don't know that that makes them an automatic, where they strike them for cause. There may be some question in terms of whether they could still be fair and impartial. What evidence, what information do you know about it? So I'm fairly certain that most of them knew about her circumstances, but
it's almost like, how can you not?
Right. I mean, her name,
such national attention.
Her name is synonymous with, the kinds of things that we dateline, stories that have come out, and all the, the negative stories that have come out about her.
All right, so we want to show some video again on this 5-minute delayed feed. This is what happened just minutes ago. We don't know if there's any sound on this, but as you can see, everyone rising. I'm assuming here, Hector, that maybe the jury is coming in.
That seems like it is. Like the jury is coming in, and they are going to be asked to take a seat. The judge will do a little housekeeping, really quick. Will let the people in the gallery, know that, hey, we're going to be here reading the verdict here very soon. I don't want any outcries. I don't want anybody to get, scream or show any kind of emotion or anything like that. And if you do, you'll be asked to leave, and you will be removed. And so you'll see some of that. I don't know that that's necessarily this feed. It looks like they're
Again, we're showing you, if you will, old video of what has just transpired in the last couple of minutes because of this 5-minute delay. We just did get word that the judge dismissed the jury.
Yes.
So they can now go home.
They're going home.
Court is adjourned. We just got word that Erica is coming out of the courtroom so she can give us more of what she witnessed in the courtroom. So we're just waiting for her to come out. We're still waiting for that video to be turned of the bailiff reading the verdict of what the jury, obviously found Lori Vallow Daybell guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. But while we're waiting here, okay, so, as far as today goes, the jury is done.
They are done. They'll be escorted down. Maricopa County Superior Court has a unique kind of setting where they're able to go into their own area, and then from there, I think the jurors are excused, and then they're free to go. They'll walk out of the Superior Court. They may allow them, given the high-profile nature of this, they may allow them to go out maybe a side door possibly. But for the most part, most of them are coming out of the front door and will.
And their duty is done. Their job is done. Now it's kind of like back to normal life.
It is.
Right?
It is, and it's a unique thing. I mean, I think I said it earlier in the 1 o'clock that I have never sat on a jury, and you hear stories in terms of the things that they might fixate on, that how they might look at certain witnesses, and we as defense lawyers and prosecutors as well, we fixate on that. We worry about how a certain witness might come off to the jury.
Right.
How might
because your client depends on it.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. And there have been stories that I've heard, in law school, and then, as a lawyer, where, you talk to the jury after, and they simply say to you, I got to tell you what it came down to is, I just didn't like your client. And it was that simple.
Wow.
I didn't like your client.
Well, and you know what? You said something interesting too that I got fixated on. You said, what? A juror typically makes up his or her mind before closing arguments.
I think that's right. They've been able to sit there and they are, listening to the witnesses. And so when they go back in to deliberate, I think most of them have already made up their mind at that point. They are sitting back. And I heard in the prior case in Idaho, they interviewed some of these jurors, and some of these jurors actually indicated that. They said, going in, we had already made up our mind in terms of the case here, but, we were going to go ahead and deliberate and keep an open mind. But the reality is, I personally, I felt that Lori was guilty. And so that, and I've heard that before a lot from jurors that, by the time they're going to deliberate, they've already made up their mind.
Really?
Yeah.
So even with the closing arguments, not much they can do to change their minds, huh?
Right, and again, the closing arguments are not evidence. The witnesses testify, they get on the stand, they're put under oath, that's evidence.
Yeah.
Right,
it's more of the summary.
Right, that
of
is
everything that has transpired.
It's important, it's really critically important, and you gotta do it right.
Okay.
You have to do it right.
All right, we just got word that 12 News journalist Erica Stapleton, she just got out of the courtroom. Erica, if you can hear me okay, what did you witness? What was it like inside the courtroom?
Yeah, Tram, we were waiting all day for this moment here. And what's interesting is that when the moment came, it went by really, really fast. Essentially, the jury came into the room. They said they had their verdict, and one of the court staff read the verdict and went through it, said guilty, and the jury was, taken out of the room. They said they needed to discuss. We thought there might be an aggravating phase following this, but ultimately Lori Vallow Daybell stipulated to the aggravating factors, and she said that was it. She said she wanted to wait to talk about sentencing until after her next murder conspiracy case here in Arizona. So that's really what happened in the past 10-15 minutes here. And I will say we did just see the jury walk out of the courtroom. I understand some of our staff, some of our team are going to try to talk to them because it would really be great to get into the mind of the jury. I'm curious to know what they were thinking, what ultimately led up to that verdict. And I'm going to be turning around for a moment here too, because we're on the watch for any family members of Charles Vallow. As we know, Lori Vallow Daybell was just convicted for conspiring to kill him. That would be her former husband. She killed him, according to the state, so she could get his money and be with her current husband, doomsday author Chad Daybell. Of course, we want to know from the jury whether they know now that they have the chance to look up this case and all of Lori Vallow Daybell's history, what they think about her past, whether they knew or had any indication that she had killed her children, that she'd been convicted of that in Idaho, and that she'd been involved in the death of her current husband, Chad Daybell's first wife, Tammy. So a lot of things to consider here and a lot of moving parts all in the past 20 or so minutes. And we're hoping to hear more from the family members of those who were impacted by these crimes. And we're expecting to hear from them hopefully in the next little bit here. We know some of them were in the courtroom when that verdict was read. And I will say there was kind of a collective sigh of like, from that side. I was sitting a few rows behind some of the family members. So that was really the mood there today. And as for, I'll send it back to you guys in a moment, but as for Lori Vallow Daybell herself, she didn't really seem fazed by this outcome. I think she knew that it was maybe a possibility that she would be found guilty here. The state did lay out a lot of evidence, and she, of course, didn't present a case. She didn't have to, but she represented herself, and it'll be curious to see if she maybe changes that approach as we head into her next trial coming up here. And guys, I'll say too, I may have some issues hearing you. So if you can't give me, if I know you might want to ask some questions, I'm happy to try and talk to you more, but I just want to flag that a lot of moving parts here. So please, it sounds like I can maybe hear something now. So if you do have any questions, please, I'm all ears.
Yeah, Erica, if you can hear me, nod your head, but I know, your head is on a swivel right now trying to see if you could talk to any jurors or any family members nearby. When you talk about the family members being in court, do you know who they were? I mean, in relation to Vallow Daybell?
Yes, from what I saw, we know Kay Woodcock was in court, and she's a key player in all of this. She testified during this trial. She's Charles Vallow's sister and also J.J. Vallow's grandmother, J.J. Vallow being Lori Vallow Daybell's child that she was convicted of murdering. So she goes way back here and has been involved in the case in Idaho. She and her husband Larry, the grandparents in this case. And it's heartbreaking to hear her story, but we know she really wanted to see justice in this case and has been waiting for 5+ years to see a jury take this case here in Arizona and actually find a guilty verdict. So it's been a really long time coming. I believe another one of Charles Vallow's brothers was sitting next to her in the courtroom, and then someone else of significance would be a man named Brandon Boudreaux. He is Lori Vallow Daybell's, stick with me, niece's ex-husband, and she's also accused of conspiring to kill him. He, of course, is very much alive. There was a shooting attempt on him back in October 2019. That would be Lori's brother, Alex Cox, accused to be the trigger man there. But that's the second case that we're expecting to face in the coming weeks here in Arizona. Of course, again, Boudreaux is alive, and it'll be really interesting to hear from him in that perspective. But there is still this murder conspiracy case. And I've mentioned this before in our coverage, but Alex Cox, again, the brother Lori is conspired of killing with, he died back in 2019 as well, so he can't be charged in any of these cases, although everyone says in all the court records he is the co-conspirator. So obviously a lot of people involved, a lot of moving parts, and I think in Mr. Boudreaux, his case, it's been interesting, I would imagine, for him to follow this because his case is coming up next.
Yeah, in fact, it's coming up in early June, again, on a charge of conspiring to commit Brandon Boudreaux. Okay, Erica, I got to ask, when that verdict was read of Lori Vallow Daybell being guilty, what was Lori's reaction?
Tram, she was standing, of course. We were waiting for this to come in, and the jury, the verdict was read. It was guilty, and I didn't see much out of her. She kind of just, talked after the fact. She told the judge she wanted to stipulate to the aggravating factors. And, he asked her, when do you want to worry about, the sentencing here for this case? And she said, we can wait till after the next trial. So very nonchalant. And, I use that word specifically because that's what we heard in the testimony here, that after Charles Vallow's death, Lori Vallow Daybell, according to investigators who took the stand to testify in this case, her behavior stood out because she was nonchalant after this horrible thing happened. And we heard in her closing remarks, again, she's representing herself, so she got a lot of FaceTime with the jury here. She said that this was just a family tragedy, but clearly the jury did not buy that from her. And yeah, like I said, Tram, she didn't, put her head down on the desk. She just took it. She took it in, and I think she maybe knew that this was a possibility here. But I will say, too, that my vantage point is from behind her. Sure. So I wasn't looking her in the eyes as this was happening, but I do think that was the impression I got from what I saw in the courtroom.
What else, if anything, stood out to you, whether it was when the jury was entering the room to anyone's demeanor, Lori Vallow Daybell's demeanor, anything else that stood out to you?
Tram, I think not just media, but a lot of people in the public and all these family members have been waiting not just a long time today to see if we got a verdict in this case, but years. So once we, knew the jury was coming in, I feel like it was almost like a collective holding of breath. I felt like people could hear a pin drop. Everyone was just waiting for that moment to come. And when that guilty verdict was read, again, it came really fast. I know in other cases, maybe there's a little more buildup or we know it's coming, but it was truly a remarkable moment because I think a lot of people have been waiting for a long time to hear this. And again, the big thing in this case is that the jury did not know her backstory. It wasn't brought up in this case. They couldn't. They had to be very specific and narrow with the Charles Vallow death investigation. And I would love to hear from jurors in the coming days here about what they thought and when they're allowed to now Google this case or talk about it. And I would love to know their thoughts now that maybe they have an understanding of the greater magnitude of all the people impacted by Lori Vallow Daybell and the crimes she's now committed.
We know her son was in the courtroom, earlier on, but what about today? Did Lori have any family in the courtroom?
Not that I saw, Tram. And, that doesn't mean they weren't watching or paying attention to this. We know that this is being broadcast on a bit of a delay, but broadcast nonetheless. And of course, there's a lot of tension on this matter. We did see her son come into the courtroom on various occasions listening to testimony. We know it's hard for him to do that. I mentioned before that he lost his siblings in this whole ordeal. He lost his father figure in this whole ordeal. And in a way, he lost his mother because she is, she's serving life in prison in Idaho, regardless of the outcome of these cases here in Arizona. So it's a huge ripple effect to all the crimes here in this case. And, I want to point out too, something we maybe haven't touched on yet, is that a lot of this is really bizarre. There are dark religious beliefs at the core of all of this. We know that Lori Vallow Daybell referred to her husband as a zombie, someone who was possessed. So these were really extreme details that the jury had to work with here. And ultimately, I don't think anyone is surprised by this verdict.
Okay, Erica, hang tight because we just turned around that video that was on a delay. The video of the verdict being read by the bailiff. So we want to show our viewers what that was. Here it is.
Has the jury reached a verdict?
Yes, we have.
I'm going to ask you to hand that to my courtroom assistant. I'll ask the clerk to read and record the verdict.
In the Superior Court of the State of Arizona in and for the County of Maricopa, State of Arizona versus Lori Daybell, CR 2021-001704-001, verdict count 1. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do find the defendant, Lori Daybell, as to the crime of count 1, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder occurring on or about July 11, 2019, guilty. Signed, foreperson. Is this your true verdict? So say you one and all.
Yes.
On the court's own motion, I'll go ahead and ask the clerk to poll the jury.
Juror number 1, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 2, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 6, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 7, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 8, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 9, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 10, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 11, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 12, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 13, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 15, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 16, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to ask the jury to retire to the jury room for just about 2 minutes. I need to discuss something with the parties.
Again, you've just watched a delayed feed of the guilty verdict. Again, Lori Vallow Daybell, the verdict is guilty for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of her former husband, Charles Vallow. Erica Stapleton has been monitoring this. She is outside the courtroom trying to get some interviews with the family along with some jurors. We do know that we did get some interviews with 2 of the jurors, so it should be interesting to hear from them. We're going to have that for you coming up in a couple of minutes. But Hector, you're listening to that verdict being read. Again, it's hard to see her facial expression when this verdict was being read, but Erica, who is in the courtroom, she said it went by quick. And, you didn't see a lot of body movement, just kind of, she just turned her head a couple of times, but really not much.
I think Erica used the phrase "did not see much out of her," right? When the verdict was read. I mean, we didn't see much of her in terms of any kind of defense.
Right.
And so, I have to believe that she expected this. I think that, she is going to, we haven't talked about this, but she's got appellate rights, that she is going to, spend some time seeking a motion for a new trial. She is going to appeal certain issues.
You
that
think
came
she's
up.
going to do that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I
Okay.
think she'll spend some time here in terms of procedurally, and I think almost automatically, given the offense, that there are certain appellate issues that are going to have to go up. And so, whether or not there's anything that truly will give her any traction is another, that's something else. But
So
she
you're
will.
saying this may not be the end of it?
No,
this
and
trial?
I think Lori understands what she's doing here. In terms of this, I think she's going to. I wouldn't be surprised if what we see here in the next week or so is another interview where, Lori wants to tell her side
Right.
and wants to, that she couldn't tell the whole story, and here's what the whole story is, or something along those lines. And
Would she defend
would-
herself again, you think? Or, I mean, obviously that didn't play out for her
And
this
just
time.
just to be clear, I'm not saying that she's got any traction on any appellate issues.
Right.
I think, though, that, I'm not going to be surprised if she starts raising all sorts of issues in terms of, that there was some unfairness. I mean, she raised an issue. She raised an issue during the trial, for instance, in terms of her interview, her video of her interview that was admitted. She questioned that it was not the entirety of the interview; it was only a portion of it. And the judge he chastised her a little bit and said, well, you could have objected. There's certain things that you could have done
Right.
during the trial and you didn't. And, and so this is what's in evidence. And she said, well, I'd like to object to the admission of this for appellate purposes so that later if she does raise any appeal issues, which I expect her to do it just in terms of, how she has handled this case and some of the issues that she's raised.
Okay, we want to go back out once again to 12 News journalist Erica Stapleton. Erica, if you can hear us all right, okay, tell us, were you able to talk to any of the family members or any jurors at all?
Well, Tram, Hector, we are still waiting for the family to come out. We are expecting to maybe hear from them, so we will stand by for that. But yes, I have not personally spoken to the jurors, but we do know my colleague Bianca Bono, she was able to talk to a few jurors. And what's interesting is that they both said it was a man and a woman who she spoke to. We understand she's trying to talk to more jurors as we speak, so we will certainly be getting more intel as we continue our reporting out here today. But the two jurors that I was able to listen to their interviews so far, they said this was sad. It was sad what happened to Charles. It was sad, and obviously none of this had to happen. One man said that, it wasn't just taking Charles's life. Lori Vallow Daybell took her own life away with this too, because this is a serious crime and it carries a sentence of 25 to life here in Arizona. Again, that doesn't necessarily matter specifically in this case because we know she's going back to Idaho to serve her life sentences there, but that's what they said. And then someone did ask, did you know? Did you know that she had been convicted in essentially 3 homicides before this, being her children, Tylee and JJ, who were killed in Idaho, and the first wife of her current husband, Tammy Daybell. She was convicted of conspiring to kill Tammy Daybell. And he said, no, I had no idea. So I think it'll be really interesting as we continue our reporting here to see what the jurors say maybe when they do learn more details about the backstory of this case. But it seems like none of them are, second guessing their verdict here today. And I will say, guys, that we may have some issues with audio, so I'm not sure if I can hear you if you have any follow-up questions, but that is the latest from out here right now.
Yeah, you know what, both, my mouth dropped and Hector raised his eyebrows when you said that, this juror had no idea of the other 3 murders. I mean, that is quite a surprise considering such, the high profile nature and the national attention that this case has gotten.
Yeah, Tram, and what's interesting is that, it might be hard to believe that, but that's supposed to be the case here. The jury shouldn't have any preconceived notions about the case that they're, currently going to be taking. So it looks like some other people are doing some live shots over here. Just want to monitor, make sure we're not missing the family. There's a lot of moving parts, as I said. But yeah, it might seem surprising, but it shouldn't be. And that's the whole process of jury selection, is that it should be an impartial juror of your or a partial jury of your peers, and they aren't supposed to know any of your background. They're supposed to take the case in front of them and make a decision based only on the evidence and the witnesses and the statements that are presented in the court case. So yeah, it might be really hard to believe. And like I said, I think that reaction after the fact is, oh my goodness, that she was involved in all these other crimes prior to this, and there's still another case yet to come. come. So certainly a horrible saga here with real life ramifications impacting a whole slew of people. And, you know, it's not just the victims who were killed in this case, it's the surviving victims too. As you said, Tram, we're waiting to hear from family who have been impacted by this for the past several years. And I'll point out too that because Lori Vallow Daybell is representing herself, she didn't plead guilty. You know, this just drags people through trial after trial after trial. And it's certainly, you know, a hard reality.
Yeah, you know what? It reminds me of going back to Idaho when she was convicted of murdering her 2 kids. You were in Idaho, and hopefully, Erica, you can still hear me, but you were in Idaho covering that trial as well. Can you compare, you know, the reaction, the media frenzy, if you will, because it looks pretty empty behind you, you know, unlike what we kind of thought before, that there would be more attention outside in terms of crowds gathering. But compare and contrast, you know, what you witnessed from Idaho to what you're witnessing after this trial of her being guilty here in Arizona.
Yeah, Trem, and I'll say it might seem like it's quiet around me, but there's certainly a lot happening, maybe off camera. We know there's a lot of media here waiting to talk to people, waiting and trying and certainly actually talking to jurors. And we know there was, you know, not the full house as we've seen throughout other days of this trial, but there were people in the courtroom today. And my understanding is they wanted to stick around and be supportive to the family when they do come out here. So we might see more people come out as we anticipate hearing more from the victims of, you know, impacted by this. But compared to Idaho, I would say there are some similarities in the fact that I think everyone, you know, knew where this case was going. It wasn't a surprise that there were guilty verdicts. And, you know, I remember it was another one of those hold your breath moments because she had a multitude of charges in Idaho. If I recall, I believe it was 7. We know there was conspiracy to commit murder charges, fraud charges, and it was guilty, guilty, guilty. It was almost reading down the list of the verdict there. So it took a bit longer to get through, and that case took a lot longer to get through. But, you know, thinking about jurors here, we know that there was an alternate juror in that case in Idaho who actually sat in for most of the trial here. I think it's not just the people impacted directly by the case and their, you know, surviving victims, surviving relatives, but this has a toll on the jury too. I know in this case, we had to see autopsy photos. There was a lot of evidence shown in court that might be disturbing to see. For the jurors in Idaho, they had to see autopsy photos of Lori Vallow Daybell's children, of Tammy Daybell, Chad Daybell's first wife, and you know, that's really hard to stomach. And I want to say in Idaho, the jury was advised that they would be seeing some really hard things in this case. So this certainly takes a toll on everybody in the courtroom. And I think those are the similarities of this case. I will say there was definitely a crowd in Idaho. People were, you know, eager to see this case come to justice because that was really the first time Lori Vallow Daybell was in a courtroom and was tried for the crimes that she was accused of committing. And in that case, the big difference for her was that she had a public defender and she didn't take the stand. The only time we really heard from her was at her sentencing, where she kind of went off on a bit of a tangent. And afterward, the judge in that case said it was obvious that she was still deep down in a religious delusion. So, you know, take with that what you will, but we saw a lot more of Lori Vallow Daybell here, and I think we saw a lot of different versions of her because we saw her kind of being sassy with the judge. We saw her, you know, in some ways very tensely cross-examining the witnesses. We saw her being sweet to some of the witnesses, and we saw her almost change her voice and change her demeanor when she was discussing things in front of the jury. So I think those are all key takeaways here, and I would love to know from jurors as well what they thought of her demeanor, what they thought of her representing herself. And I know our reporter Bianca Bono has been working very hard to get some of that jury reaction, and we know we'll have some of that coming up shortly for you guys.
Erica, because you've covered her extensively from beginning to end, why did, in your opinion, why did you think that she wanted to defend herself? Like you said, you know, she had a, you know, criminal defense attorney when she was in Idaho, but why represent herself this time for this case?
You know, Tram, I don't know. And I would love to ask her not just that question, but a multitude of questions if we can ever get an interview with her. We have put in a request in the past and she's denied it, but I think it would be really insightful to understand what led up to all this, especially because, again, there's so much damage and destruction along the way here. But what I can tell you is that in Idaho, her case was delayed significantly because of competency issues. She actually had to leave the jail facility where she was being held in Idaho and was treated at a state hospital there until she was competent enough to stand trial. And we were wondering if that would be an issue here, too, in Arizona. And initially, she had some public defenders, and they said we should check for competency, and she did not want to do that. So I think this was her trying to take control of her situation. Again, this is my insight. We haven't heard this from her directly, but I think that may be the case here. And what we saw is that it didn't really do her much good.
Hey, Erica, you know what? I'm going to let you loose right here because it
And
seems like there's
we
a
might
lot
be
of
getting
activity behind
some family
you.
members.
Yeah, so why don't you, I'm going to let you have a moment to see what is happening right now with possible family members. But while Erica is trying to get some more interviews, Hector, hold on, let's listen in here.
I'm just glad it's over with. I really am. My whole family is, my sisters, and I just want to thank everybody, the Arizona Prosecutor's Office, Trina Kay, and everyone else that was here and got us through it all. Our court advocates and the whole 9 yards. Today's a good day. We won.
Were you worried, Jerry, that the jury might come back with a not guilty at all, or were you pretty confident?
I had a little concern, but when it came back so quick, I pretty much knew that it was done. Nate. So.
What did you think of her demeanor during trial?
I thought she was kind of a smarty pants, not real. I don't know what word I'm looking for. I know which one I would use.
Just trying to be nice.
Right. I know which one I would use, but so anyway.
What did you think of her lawyering skills?
I thought she sucked.
Do you think she did herself any favors by being her own attorney?
Probably not. I'm sure the first day into the trial, she wished she would have had an attorney.
You think?
A real attorney, right.
Did you look at her when the verdict was read?
I could see the back of her head.
And what was there? Did you have any reaction? Did she have any reaction?
I couldn't see, but she didn't shake her head or that I saw. So.
Kay, what did you think looking at her?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Come on, Kay,
I
your
was just-
turn.
I just saw the back of her head too. I couldn't see anything, and she didn't. A lot of times during court, she'd shake her head no when she didn't agree with something being said, or she would just shake her head no, and she didn't shake her head no. So, I guess that means she really did do it.
She seemed to,
Oh, okay.
Kay,
Sorry.
She seemed to really have a visceral reaction to you,
That's what I heard.
and you were on the stand. What was that moment like for you?
I didn't know that she was that shaken by me being there. And then when I got off the stand, I really didn't even know what I said. And then once Jerry and my sister Susan and our friend Laura Ferris and who else was right there? And Colby was right there. And they were like, "You did so good." She was shaking like a leaf when you, and I was like, "What? No way." And it was, the more I thought about it, I was like, yeah, okay, that's all I needed to know. That made my day. That of all the people she should be shaken for, and she was shaking about me, good. I was very pleased.
When the verdict was read as guilty,
What
did you feel?
Oh, just 6 years of walking the pits of hell every day, and about halfway through, I realized, okay, I'm gonna make it through. But it was a long time.
Elation.
It was a long time before I got to that point. But it's still difficult, but it's okay. I'm ready to move on. It's time. We've got a 10-year-old granddaughter we're raising now, and I've got my hands full, and I'm real happy to being her grandma. So
Does it almost feel, does it feel real after 6 long years of walking through hell, as you mentioned?
yes, it feels real because for about 3 years I didn't feel anything. I was totally just didn't feel anything, numb. Then I started feeling it.
Justice for Charles?
Yes, and the order in which it's happened, you know, this was the first incident, the first murder, and then everything up in Idaho, and then so Charles would have wanted, you know, take care of Tammy and the kids first, and get to me when they're ready. And so he would have been. He's fine, and I know that he's pleased with us, and excuse me, there was a vibe. I know he's pleased with us, and I feel I feel good.
We had a juror tell us that your testimony stuck with them, and they even saw you after and felt like there was justice for your brother. What does that mean to hear that?
Great. Whatever I said, I struck a chord, and that's what I wanted to do. That's what I was trying to do, and I'm grateful. I mean, hey, the Lord gave us. Well, this was thrust upon us, and our lives just went into like a tornado for a long time, and then getting to say things in the first 2 trials, and then getting to speak about Charles finally, because he's been so silent. And I mean, it's just been silent where he's at. I know people thought we forgot about him, and no way, you know. And but law enforcement never stopped. Like Lori said, they didn't stop because I was right there behind with law enforcement here in Arizona, talking and saying, "What's going on now? Tell me." You know, I was in contact with them nonstop, so I knew at some point, you know, it was going to happen, and then all the other stuff, and you know, I'm just glad we got to. I'm just glad this is done. Now we just have to get justice for Brandon, and I will be back. I can't stay the whole time for his, but I will stay as long as I can. Kind of more towards the end of it, I guess, and because then it will truly be over. I say I've still got a little bit left before I can close my book, but when that's over, then I can close my book.
And Kay, I don't know if you noticed, I saw 2 jurors look at you as they were walking out. Did you notice that at all?
No, I didn't. I watched them walk in because I know that if they look at you when they're walking in, that's a good sign. And nobody looked at me, but I didn't see, so I didn't watch them walk out. I didn't think to look. So
What'd you think
good.
when Lori waived aggravation? What'd you think?
I really couldn't hear her because, you know, that baby talk she does, that baby voice. She needs to lose that, man. But I hope she grows up in prison and learns how to talk like a woman, you know, and not a baby. But anyway.
One of the jurors, the woman with the long hair, she said that she really just wanted to give you a hug. She's like, you know, afterwards, I really just wanted to give her a hug. And just tell
You
her
know,
I'm sorry.
in Idaho, all the jurors I've met from up there, from both trials there, that was the one thing they were like, I just wanted to hug you. I just wanted to hug you. So I hope I get to meet her. I hope she reaches out to me. Nate, if anybody calls you, give them my number. And just make sure they're a real juror. And yeah, I want to talk to them. Absolutely.
I was going to say, Kay, I'm wondering if there's anything you'd say to Lori at this point.
We got you, and you're not the smartest person in the room, and now it's time for you just to hide away, and well, after Brandon's trial, but you can just hide away, and everybody's going to forget about you. We'll be on our way through our life, and she'll be rotting in prison where she deserves to be.
And like Charles always used to say, love always wins.
Yeah.
So.
And oh yeah, thank you for saying that. Yeah, love always wins was Charles's thing, and yeah, so it does.
She described this as a family tragedy.
That is absurd. That was.
When you heard that mantra over and over again.
And calling Charles my husband, whom she was hated at the time, whom she was ready to kill him. You know, it's like that just shows you what she's an actress. She turns on this persona and goes with it, and then boom, she turns it off, and then there's the real her, whatever the real her is. I sure never knew her.
Tell us a little bit, just for me, about Charles. You know, let's bring it back to him and his legacy.
Hey, you want to take that one?
I'm sorry, what was that?
If you could just
tell
us a
them
little
about
bit
Charles.
about Charles and his legacy and how you want us to think about him.
He was my big brother, you know. I followed in his footsteps. I did everything he did. He was only a year and 2 months older than me. So we hung around a lot. We had a lot of the same friends. He was a big influence in my life. And he was just a good dude. He was, all the way from a kid till when she killed him. So, you know.
What did it mean to hug Trina Kay at the end? What did that feel like? To hear the verdict and then give her a hug?
Well, I hugged her and told her I loved her because she did such a great job. And it felt good. It did.
And she did do a great job. And all the detectives and everybody that has worked on this case, from Nicole Bayer to she's our victim advocate, and Trina and Nate Duncan and all the detectives that have come, and even we had a few visitors from Idaho that came, and that was welcome. And I got a thank you from, not a thank you, I got a congratulations from Rob Wood, from the prosecutor in Idaho a while ago. And we lost some dear family. We lost a lot, but we have gained family as well. So, you know, there's the silver lining. And even in the worst times of your life, there is something good there. You just take sometimes a little while to find it. But y'all, we're dying here.
And so,
Susan, do you want
Lauren?
to say anything? No, she doesn't want to.
And as a parting shot, they got the bitch again. Thanks, y'all.
Thank y'all.
All right, you've just been listening to Jerry Vallow, that is Charles's brother, along with Kay Woodcock, who you just heard, that is Charles's sister. They came out of that courtroom and they basically gave, you know, just an emotional, you can see how emotional they were, and that how justice was served.
Right.
And, you know, Kay saying that, I remember Erica asked her, what would you say to Lori Vallow Daybell? And Kay said, we gotcha. You're not the smartest person in the room. She'll be rotting in prison where she deserves to be. And Charles would say, love always wins. It was quite, you know, you could tell that collective sigh that Erica was talking about.
They've been living this for years.
For years.
Right.
6 years.
The investigation takes, you know, all this time. And then when she's indicted, then it still takes more time, right? We're talking years before it ever gets to a trial. And then, you know, Erica laid out, and this is so true, you know, I've worked on cases where you're working for years, and all of a sudden you're there, and that verdict is like, boom, wait, and it's
so fast.
And it's over.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, you know. And so it is, it's jarring. It is, you know, the family now they walked out, and, you know, they're happy with this verdict. And
so Kay Woodcock, again, Charles's sister,
right.
She said something that was very interesting that, you know, you kind of said, oh, that was a good point. The fact that Lori Vallow Daybell kept characterizing Charles as her husband. We know this was her fourth husband, her former estranged husband. But you thought that was a really important part.
This is all about, you know, when you're in front of a jury, you think about things like this in terms of how you might characterize Charles Vallow? Are you going to call him your, ex-husband or you estranged husband? And I thought it was just odd when she was gallivanting, like it was fantasy land that, hey, he's my husband. This is my husband. When the evidence, established that he had filed for divorce, had been irate, had questioned the fact that Lori was having an affair with Chad Daybell. And here she is acting like, oh, you know what? He's my husband.
Right.
That had to be off-putting to the jury.
Yeah.
That, we watching it just during the televised trial, it just was a lot. And how many times she kept repeating that.
Sure. To probably her thinking her strategy, right? All right, we want to go back out live once again to Erica Stapleton. Erica, you were just there at that, news conference, if you will, with her family. We heard from Jerry Vallow, Charles's brother, along with his sister, Kay Woodcock. And, tell us what transpired out of that. Very emotional.
Oh, yes, Tram, absolutely emotional, and I would imagine in some ways cathartic for them. You heard them say that they've been waiting a long time for this, but something that stood out to me is Kay Woodcock, Charles's sister, as you said, she said, it's taken a long time to get here. This was the first incident in a string of incidents that caused all these deaths, caused the death of former spouses and kids and dark religious beliefs. It's been a whole horrible twist-turned saga that's really led us to this point here back in Arizona. And something she said was that Charles would have wanted it this way. Take care of the kids' cases first. Those were the trials in Idaho where Lori Vallow Daybell and her now husband Chad Daybell again were convicted in the murders of her children, as well as their roles in the death of Tammy Daybell, Chad Daybell's first wife. So that was something that stood out to me, is that she said he would have wanted this to come first. Then we can come back and do this. But she also said they're not finished. There's still one remaining case here, and we know the alleged victim in that case. He's standing right by over here. We're hoping we might be able to hear from him because we haven't heard from him throughout these proceedings. We know he's testified in Idaho, but here we know he's been present and watching. So this case isn't over yet. And something else that Kay Woodcock said was that, for many years she didn't feel anything with this. She said it felt like walking through the pits of hell. And I don't think there's a better description than that to describe such torment that one family has to go through, given all the trials and all the death and all the murder and now all the convictions. So it really is a heavy toll. And I was able to ask her, is there anything you would say to Lori at this point in time? And she said, we got you. That's it. We got you. It's continued justice in this case because every charge she's faced in this string of, in these string of cases here that are all interconnected, she's been found guilty so far. So I think that's a real sense of justice for the victims, the surviving victims in this case. And I'll say too that she said next step is Lori Vallow Daybell will rot in prison. So that's really the reality here. She said they have the opportunity to move on, but she'll be rotting in prison.
She specifically said that she'll be rotting in prison where she deserves to be. Something also interesting that struck me, Erica, when I was listening to both Kay and Jerry, is that when she had said that one of the jurors, or actually one of the reporters, I think, brought to light that one of the jurors actually wanted to hug her. And that brings back, again, this case has gotten so much national media attention that it's become like a spectacle. And you forget, these are people's lives that are involved here. And they have, as Kay had said, had endured 6 years of walking in the pits of hell every day. And, when you hear that emotional connection of a juror wanting to hug Kay, that really brings it back to reality. That, this was so emotional. This was a life. This was her brother, Charles.
Yes. And I would say that also shows how effective the prosecution was in this case, that when they put Kay Woodcock on the stand, the jury listened and it mattered what she said. Even though this horrible tragedy has occurred, they listened to her. So I think that's key. And Kay had mentioned too that, it's sometimes a sign if a jury looks at you when they come back with a verdict or looked at you on the way out. So it's unfortunately, a playbook that they learn because she's been through so many of these trials so far for the related charges in these cases. And, she's been through this before. It's unfortunately not her first rodeo. And just to show the interconnectedness of all of this, she said that the prosecutor in the Idaho cases texted her saying congratulations today. There's really this big web of people paying attention to what's going on here in Arizona now and who have been following this case for years and years and years. And Kay said that, they may have lost members of their family, but they gained a new one in all the supporters and all the love that they've received. And I want to show you, I hope it's in my pocket still. Again, it's been a bit busy out here today, but people are handing out these bracelets. It says justice for Tylee, JJ, Charles, and Tammy. These are the 4 victims who they've now have convictions in their cases right now. It's been, they say the wheels of justice turn slowly, but this has been several years in the works now, but I think they're ready to pass these out, and there must be a bit, I don't know if celebration is the right word, it certainly probably is not, but there's probably some relief, and there's, it's closing a chapter and being able to move on to something else beyond this trial phase here.
I'm so glad you brought that to show us that bracelet, because I feel like it's so symbolic, and it literally gave me chills that those are the 4 lives sadly lost in all of this, in the media circus, as if you will, in just this case that has just gotten, grown so huge that, again, you forget the human lives that were at stake. And the fact that, another thing that struck me was Jerry Vallow, Charles's brother, who hugged the prosecutor, Trina Kay. Just again, these are human beings, and they finally felt a taste of justice after all these years.
Yeah, I think that was really clear, and I can't imagine. I'm so glad we have the opportunity. I know it can be so much to talk to the media over and over again, especially when the results of this case have been so tragic, but these verdicts have been exactly what they wanted. These are the outcomes they want, guilty verdicts. So, it's such a tough balance, because it's hard. It's so hard to have to face these crimes over and over and over again. But that's exactly what this family is doing. And Kay and her brother said they want to be supportive in the next case, too, of that next victim, Brandon Mujarrah. I'll give you a quick backstory on that case as well. I know we've talked about it before, but her brother, Alex Cox, Lori's brother, she and Alex they're accused of conspiring to kill him back in 2019. So this was all part of the series of horrific events back in 2019 leading into 2020 when this all unraveled. And again, it's taken so long to get to justice in this case, partly because she was on trial in Idaho before this, and so was Chad Daybell. So it's taken a long time to get here, but certainly a memorable and important day for the family of Charles Vallow.
Absolutely. Some of justice has been served, and that was a big one today as, again, the jury came in with the verdict guilty. All right, Erica, thank you so much. I know you've got a lot more reporting to do coming up for 5 and 6. We appreciate your all the coverage that you've brought to us. And Hector, let's kind of wrap up all the events that have unfolded. You had predicted from the beginning that this verdict would be guilty. Now it's come to a close. And what was interesting that you had mentioned too, really, out of all of this, the humanization at the very end.
Right. And I think the prosecutor in that case understood, right, that we're talking about, a man that lost his life, and that, she told the story about how it happened and how it was so needless, and really how calculated Lori acted after. And I thought, I really hope we get to hear from some of these jurors in terms of what went into this, but I have to believe that Lori's just behavior, they call it the consciousness of guilt. And it's how they act after the act, the alleged crime. And here, her behavior just didn't match up, right? It didn't match up with somebody who was, I'm a victim of self-defense. And I think that they humanized Charles in terms of, the presentation, and really showed Lori to be this cold, calculated murderer. And she did nothing to help her cause. She really did nothing to help her cause. And in fact,
if anything, maybe hurt her.
Absolutely, absolutely hurt her cause. And, and so I'm really interested to see how jurors come forward.
And just hearing her family, his family, Charles Vallow's brother and sister, what struck you about that?
Just the amount of time that they probably have had to sit, as a defense lawyer, we are sitting there and, we have several cases that we're working on, at one time. But this is their case. This is the case that they're
That's the only
talking
thing that
about.
matters.
Right, every
Yeah.
day. They are going to sleep thinking about this, waking up thinking about this. And so in some respects, it is closure, but it's not really closure.
Right. It won't bring Charles back.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's difficult. One other little fact to add. You know, I know that she has this other case out there.
Right.
Right. And it's set. I think it's set for trial. We're gonna have to see what happens here strategically in terms of whether or not the county attorney offers Lori some kind of plea and says, "Here's a plea. You're already convicted. You know, do you really want to go to trial on this?" So there's a chance that, you know, again, if Lori has the proper guidance and, you know, maybe she now decides, okay, I want to have a lawyer for this case
Right.
come in.
Learn her lesson, yeah.
Right. And so there might be a discussion in terms of whether or not she seeks to resolve it, to wrap maybe those cases up concurrently and allow her then to go serve her sentence in Idaho at the state prison in Idaho. So we'll have to see.
Would that be the best case scenario?
Well, I mean, again, I don't know the evidence in terms of that allegation. She might
Sure.
feel, you know, have her certain convictions in terms of her innocence. But if the evidence is strong, and this case there was a lot of evidence against her, right? Circumstantially, but it was a lot, and it was a lot for her to overcome. And so if that's the same situation, if they have the same kind of issues in the evidence there, you know, and if Lori is looking at this as a reasonable defendant trying to resolve the case, that might make the most sense here in terms of wrapping this up quickly so that she can begin to serve her sentences. But if we learned anything about Lori Vallow Daybell is that there's no certainty in terms of her decisions and her behavior.
Right.